Chapter 27. Captivity Day 27 Ujaran. When Bruno arrived out front, he had a leather pouch tied to his belt and a tall walking stick with a knob-like head. So, not a medical bag. Ujaran smirked. Well, let's go see what my contact came up with. I was rescued from the remains of a broken ship and brought here. Where I came from, I was tribal head priest of the Mu, with 60 wives. If I knew leaving with the visitors would end this way, I would have fed them to the arm, Bruno said as they walked down the street together. Your wives? Ujaran said in dismay. No, Bruno rumbled. I would have fed the visitors to the arm. As they neared Tuta, Ujaran asked, What's an arm? Bruno held his arm out in front of Ujaran to stop him, pointed to a line of ants traversing a gutter, and said, Like those, but big like me. Not the sort of thing I'd want to be fed to, Ujaran said. We fed them our dead and dying, Bruno shrugged. They make it fast for Mu, not for visitors. Hey, Trudy, Ujaran said, desperate to change the subject. What did you find out? Trudy was standing in the open front doorway of her shop. Is there any more you can give me? Trudy asked. Bruno and Ujaran gave her copies of the pictures they had collected from the club security cameras and shared their current suspicions. One of Trudy's contacts had spotted something in the photo of the abduction they'd missed, the silhouette of a Lupian in the backseat window, and an outline of a Terran shadow in the driver's seat. It was impossible to make out any details due to the lighting. Vincent, over at Illicit, recognized one of the Mongani thugs. That guy sounds like a real piece of work, Trudy said. He goes there for role-play scenarios from time to time. Due to client agreements, he couldn't tell me too much, but Vincent did tell me the guys suffered convenient temporary deafness when participants called red light a few times. They should have reported, Ujaran started to say. The guy has deep enough pockets to buy forgiveness from the other players, Trudy shrugged. Ask Vincent to submit an informal complaint, just so we can establish a pattern of behavior. Otherwise, we end up a cycle of with the wealthy taking advantage of the poor. I can ask, Trudy said noncommittally, but these things happen all the time. Is that all you were able to get? Ujaran scowled. I don't want to think about what will happen if Adiaxi gets involved. I'm going to give you a date, Trudy smiled. Vincent was telling me about a client that he strong-armed into accepting the bribe. She filed a formal complaint against the venue, because she was afraid of retaliation. Look up the complaint, and check the filer's account for unusual activity around that time. She hasn't been around for a while, so I'm not sure how helpful she'll be. I appreciate this, Trudy, Ujaran said with a slight bow of his head. That conference is in 12 days, Trudy winked. You can make it up to me by making sure my date doesn't stand me up. I'll do all I can to make sure she doesn't, he laughed softly. Who's your friend? She asked. Ujaran walked a few steps away and took out his tablet while Bruno and Trudy talked. The complaint against Illicit was from almost a year ago. The woman was clearly enraged. She named names and was verbose and specific. She was hospitalized for 2 days after the incident. The report was closed with no further action required. It was clear from the wording she held the Mongani, not the venue, responsible for what happened, which meant she'd filed the incorrect form. Whoever looked this over must have just closed it for being misfiled without reading the content. He made a note for himself to have a few choice words with the agent who closed the report. Ujaran shot a message directly to Nevari, asking if she could pull a current address for the woman's citizen ID. He told her he'd been asked to look into it as a personal favor, hoping it would keep her from looking too deeply into his motives. Bruno laughed, whispered something to Trudy, and walked over to Ujaran with a huge grin on his face. Security called one of the kitties that Sato used to live with. They just sent me her current address. Should we go take a look? I hope you can fit in my car, Ujaran snickered. I usually ride in the back seat, with the chair in front of me down, and my head forward. Sounds like a plan, Ujaran said. Just don't tear up the floor with your hooves. Bruno snorted. Strawberry's place wasn't in a great part of town. Her apartment building had a lovely view of the backside of a brewery. Ujaran had gotten a reply from Nevari while driving, but wasn't able to read it until after they pulled into the lot. Bruno let himself out right away. The vehicle was a bit cramped for someone his size, and he had to stretch his, well, everything. Ujaran opened Nevari's message. The woman who had filed the complaint had been reported missing 8 months ago, and found dead in the Garden District just 2 months ago. Her body had been dumped, and she had been dead for some time. The corpse had been soaked in chemicals and burned, which made determining when she died unreliable. I'm going to take a look inside, Bruno said through while thumping his stick on the ground. Try the knob before bashing down any doors, Ujaran yelled to him as he continued reading. The investigation into the woman's death included the coroner's report and notes from an interview with the person that discovered the body, but that was about it. There was no actual investigation done. It was simply closed. By the same agent who closed the complaint against Illicit. The likelihood of keeping this off the books had just dropped to 0. Ujaran compiled the information he'd found on the Mongunny and the suspicious case closures, and forwarded it to Nevari, with a note informing her he believed their new Midnight Fellowship delivery girl had been abducted by the same group. He asked her how he should proceed. He couldn't access the woman's bank records without government approval. Ujaran got out of the car and headed up the stairs to make sure his temporary partner wasn't up in Strawberry's room making a mess of the place. I'm down there researching case logs, while you're up here having a snack, Ujaran glared at Bruno as he walked inside. She ordered takeout. Bruno objected. It was getting cold. Ujaran shook his head in disgust as he walked to the corner of the sparsely furnished room to take a look at her computer screen. There was an active call with 3 participants. One was listed as idle. Pink ice. Probably Strawberry. There was a pane open with a blinking cursor, halfway through a line of code of some sort. There wasn't anything open that would give him any hints. Considering how he'd heard about all this, he decided turning off the computer would be the best course of action. While you're over there, Bruno said, can you see if you can find a pair of her underwear with a pubic hair? What? No. Ujaran said angrily. What's wrong with you? I know a tracking spell, but it requires a personal item. The more personal the better. Can you think of anything more personal than a pube? She's shaved, Ujaran growled. Really? That's too bad, Bruno said. Have you considered hair from the top of her head? Ujaran smirked. That's a good way to find out where she buys her hair dye, Bruno scoffed. If you'll stop eating her food, I'll help you look, Ujaran grumbled. It must float, Bruno insisted. Ujaran opened the bathroom door and took a peek inside. There are plenty of toenails in the trash in here. Take your pick. Ujaran's tablet beeped. He looked at it, expecting a follow-up from Nevari, but it was a priority message from Lilac. Do what you have to do, Ujaran grumbled as he walked out the front door. I have to see what this is about. The Lupian, Bruno said as he dropped his tablet on Strawberry's mattress, then headed to the bathroom to look for a nail clipping. The message from Lilac read, "Why are you looking into closed files?" It included a button prompt to join a conversation. Ujaran took a screen capture of the participant list and forwarded it to Nevari, asking how he should proceed. Ujaran wandered back in and looked down at Bruno's tablet. It wasn't a standard model. It was made primarily for doodling, but could send and receive files. The file sent from Nim was a photo taken of a printout for a heavily redacted employee record, with a red circle drawn around one of the emergency contacts. Their brother was employed at the freighter docks. It was a start, and could help to explain how they found Strawberry's home address. Nevari asked him to run a program that would piggyback her as a blind participant. Programs of this sort were normally only used in ransom cases. He'd never used one before, so had to take a few seconds to install and read the program instructions. Ujaran sent a message directly to Lilac as he walked back outside, letting her know he'd been told Lady Darkseid's fruit delivery girl had been abducted, and the investigation had led him to a potential serial killer. Lilac responded by insisting he join the call, with instructions to only refer to Adiarkse as our special guest. Some days I hate my job, Ujaran glowered. He could hear chanting inside the room behind him. Bruno was sitting on the floor with a small earthen bowl half full of water on the ground in front of him. He was chanting while lowering a toenail clipping into it. Ujaran closed over the door to prevent distraction, triple-checked the program was running and set correctly, then joined the conversation. Ujaran, joined the call, DVZ. So, they're just some MNF shuttle jockey? Tezra, with all due respect, Dr. Midnight Fellowship military personnel have been working with and assisting Kulani Dominion security staff for over half a century. Disrespecting a person for the nature of service they provide is antithetical to the vaunted principles of Mistress Kulani. Nova, is this the guy? Lilac, yes, Nova. Ujaran, welcome. We are discussing the cases you've been looking into today. Those cases are closed. You are to cease your investigation immediately. Ujaran, I can't do that. Nova, you can and you will. Ujaran, right now, our special guest is unaware of the circumstances at play. This situation must be resolved quickly and quietly, before she learns the details. DVZ, what is he babbling about? I demand an immediate end to this nonsense. Ujaran, is that the same Nova who closed the complaint against the venue and the murder of the complainant? Lilac, it is. Nova, you're jumping to conclusions. The complaint against the venue was filed inappropriately. The other, unrelated issue, was not a murder case. It was a resolved missing persons case. A separate case would have been opened if it was determined to be a murder. Lilac, she's right. Tezra, by order of military command, you are to terminate this investigation. DVZ, good, then the matter is settled. I'm ready, Bruno said as he opened the door, holding the bowl in one hand. I need to deal with this, Ujaran grumbled. I will find her, Bruno said. You can catch up later. Ujaran stepped aside to let him pass and waved him on. Bruno wandered off while staring down into the bowl. Nova, thank you, Dr. Zaius. Sorry to have wasted your time. Ujaran, Virgil Zaius? Lilac, yes, the author. DVZ, I'm not here to speak with fans. Ujaran, I just want to ask the good doctor how much he pays to buy his way out of red light consent violations. A woman reports the venue after he strong-arms her, goes missing, then found dead. Is Nova a fan or are you paying her off too? Tezra, you were given a direct order. Drop this, or you could lose your military commission. DVZ, I'd like to press charges for fraud, slander, defamation. I'll have my lawyers present you with the comprehensive list. Lilac, Ujaran, that's a serious charge. Are you willing to throw away your citizenship over this? He closed the door and ran down to his car. Ujaran, I'm going to let our special guest know her fruit delivery girl has been abducted, and I've been instructed to halt my investigation into it. Virgil, Nova, you two really picked the wrong girl to screw with this time. Ujaran rested his tablet on a dashboard mounting and peeled out of the parking lot. He sped past Bruno as he headed straight to the confinement area. Tezra left the call. A message from Nevari popped up on his screen. Tezra had been taken into custody by the order, which superseded the military chain of command. Lilac, leave our guest out of this. Just open a formal investigation into the missing girl, and I'll put my best people on it. This isn't your area of expertise. It looks like you dove head first down a rabbit hole. Nova, he's dragging my name through the mud too. Who is this special guest, anyway? Lilac, you're not cleared for that information. Nova, but he is. Ujaran pulled over to the curb, 2 blocks from the facility, in eyesight of the front door. He didn't have to go in to let Adiaksi know what was going on. He was confident she'd hear his thoughts if he thought to her forcefully enough. He didn't need to cause even more trouble for himself. Lilac, your duties are in dispatch and as a records clerk. You're not cleared to know what his security exemptions are, but I can see yours. Ujaran moved the conversation panel out of his way, and ran an information request on Dr. Virgil Zayas. He'd co-authored a series of books on the topic of race relations and revolutionary movements, along with a Kaiman professor named Javril Thades. They were both Kulani citizens. Javril was currently working as a professor at a university in Taz Corp space. There didn't seem to be much point in looking any further than that, but it was interesting that Zayas about the author page of his 3rd book listed his home system as the Laika colony on Wodam. Ujaran shot a message to Nevari, asking if Nova happened to be Laika, and if there was a shifted image of her on file. Laika were a fairly rare species. He couldn't help but wonder if she was the bovine woman, and had been brought over during the Laika Leadership Initiative a few years back. DVZ, left the call. Nova, left the call. Lilac, I will start an investigation into Nova. Please don't do anything rash. Ujaran, thank you. Lilac, you'll still have to answer for any charges filed by the doctor. Ujaran, I have to say, you impressed me today. Lilac, I appreciate the compliment, but how? Ujaran, you anticipated my arrival. Lilac, where are you? Ujaran, I'm parked down the street, looking at the containment area. I see you tripled the guard. Lilac, stay in the call and hold your position. He knew there were more guards than usual, but he hadn't actually counted them. There were usually just 4 standing at attention, but right now there were 10, and only 2, at the top of the stairs, were standing properly. The matching guards at the bottom were talking with the 6 others. The 7-layer uniforms of the extra 6 were close enough to fool someone that wasn't suspicious, but one of the lower layers was the wrong color. One of the 2 guards who was talking to the imposters raised his hand to cover his ear. Lilac must be calling them. Ujaran, there are 6 imposters. Layer 3 is the wrong shade of blue. Lilac, thank you. I'll let them know. Adiaksi, are you awake? Ujaran screamed mentally. I'm not deaf, she thought back angrily. Are you in the mood for some exercise? Sure, Kali thought back. What do you have in mind? Is Strawberry with you? Ujaran, your men are outnumbered, and one of the pretenders keeps thumbing their pistol. I'm betting their trigger locks are disabled. How about you just let them inside and let her have some exercise? There are a bunch of fake guards that want to meet you. I think it's the people that were pulling her tail. Up for a fight? Ujaran thought. Sure. The predatory desire within Adiaksi's thought chilled him to the core. Lilac, you're sure you can get her back inside? Ujaran, positive. Drop the field, get your people clear, and leave the rest to her. When he looked back up from his tablet, the imposters had already made their move. One of the regular guards at the bottom of the stairs had a knife to their throat, the other was backing away from the drawn weapons of the imposters. The guards at the top of the stairs were opening the doors. If I expected guests, I would have dressed for the occasion. Ujaran felt Adiaksi giggling mirthlessly in his mind. The intruder holding the guard hostage and the Mongani with twin pistols stood outside trying to menace the regular guards who had been ordered to stand down, while the 4 invaders rushed inside. Ujaran shook his head in disbelief. They were exceptionally stupid. Adiaksi was feeling playful. She'd put on her kimono robe and fox mask. Her tails were wrapped around her waist. They were holding her arms behind her back, leading her out of the building with her hands held behind her back. She turned her head toward his car, smiled and winked as they walked her at gunpoint toward a waiting van. The angle of where her tails were passing through the back of her robe looked odd. Ujaran, Lilac, tracked them with the satellites. I've never tailed a car before, Lilac. One step ahead of you. He pulled away and started following them at a safe distance, trying not to raise any suspicion. Lilac, I know where they're going. A building downtown is evacuating. Nobody knows why, but they're refusing to go back inside. I'm sending you the address. Ujaran, how many times have I said you should trust her? Lilac, considering I was worried this might be a scheme you two dreamed up, a few more. And she wonders why Adiaksi doesn't like her. Ujaran scoffed quietly as he plugged in the address and changed course. A message from Nevari popped up. Ujaran pulled to the side of the road to read it. Nova was a Leica, but the required image of her in her shifted form wasn't included with her official files. He double-checked the map. The destination was a 135-story building catering to the needs of the wealthiest citizens. Most of the occupants were seldom there, but still owned a good portion of a floor, or more. Some even maintained their own private security firms on site. This was bad. Could the predicted fall of the Dominion everyone was worried about be a financial collapse? No, not from her pulling the central column from a single sky-rise. The Dominion was incredibly wealthy for a nation of its size. Even before they partnered with Gamaro Inc., she seemed awfully calm for someone walking into this sort of danger. He took a short cut, parked across from the parking garage, and waited for the van to arrive. It didn't take long. There were 2 people seated in the front. The rest must be in the back guarding her. As the van turned and went down the ramp into the underground parking area, he saw a slender stream of water flowing out of a seam in the back door. Did they stick her in a Stasis pod? He worried, but reassured himself. They would have had to subdue her, and there was too much water for that. He grabbed his tablet, climbed out of the car, walked around back and opened the trunk, took out his rifle, and slung it over his shoulder. Ujaran, I'm going in to investigate. I need a trigger override on my service rifle. Lilac sent the code, then he disconnected from the call. Ujaran crossed the street and walked into the garage. He didn't know the full extent of her abilities. Maybe the water was her way of leaving him a trail. It was certainly making it easy for him to track the van. The water led him down to the 2nd subterranean level. The back of the van wasn't sealed, and one of the front doors was still open. There was no sign of her or the driver. Ujaran carefully opened the back door. Ice and water flowed out onto the ground. He then pulled out his tablet, switched it to ops mode, and put it away. Dispatch, he said. His headset beeped. Ujaran here. Can you send a cleanup crew to Index Heights Garage, sub-level 2? I've got 5 dead in the back of a van here. It looks like they may have been transporting liquid nitrogen and had a leak. He closed over the door and walked away from the grisly sight. Thank you for your service, the dispatcher said. On the floor of the cab was a short-barrel shotgun with a melted barrel. It was an illegal custom build, but in its current condition that hardly mattered. He headed over to the elevator. She once told him she was a battle mage trained by Sada Kar. He smiled and nodded, but had no idea who that was or what she meant. He used to wonder what she was capable of, but now he dreaded the seeming inevitability of learning more. Once the elevator arrived, He plugged in his security card and got a readout of its recent activity. She'd gone to the 30th floor. Clearly her former captor was her prisoner now. Ujaran's tablet beeped. It was a message from Lilac with an attached video. The message read, "Tell her this is not how consent works." The video was Adiaxie telling the intruders that she considers going with them implied consent to use the entrails of everyone they work with in an art project. "What the fuck?" Ujaran chuckled, then sent a reply, "It's a work in progress." He smiled with amusement as the elevator sped to its destination. A security alert sounded on his tablet. "Tell me she didn't," Ujaran growled as he looked to see who'd been added to the valid target list, fearing the worst. "Adiaxie, you're a valid target now," Ujaran thought as loudly as he could while calling Lilac directly. "Office of the Praetorian," Lilac speaking. "What the fuck are you thinking?" Ujaran yelled. "Are you trying to provoke her?" "What are you talking about?" Lilac asked. "Adiaxie's has been listed as valid," he snarled. "What? She shouldn't be," Lilac scoffed. "Let me check." The elevator stopped. It showed he'd arrived on floor 30, but the door wouldn't open. He could hear weapons fire somewhere on the other side of the door. He popped the inner door and forced it open. The outer door had been sealed completely, not melted or fused, but the seam between the two panels was simply gone, as it was now a single slab of metal. Ujaran popped the hatch at the top of the elevator. Another tone sounded on his tablet. The security alert had been cancelled. He heard distant screaming as the sound of guns firing ceased abruptly. It took a few tries, but he managed to jump up and grab onto the edge of the hatch. "It wasn't me," Lilac said over his earpiece. "It was Nova." She added her using an image taken from one of the building's security cameras. "I'm issuing an arrest warrant for Nova now." He felt a little self-conscious of all the grunting and groaning noises he was making while pulling himself onto the top of the elevator. "What's going on over there?" Lilac asked in dismay. "I'm on top of the elevator now. 30 is sealed," Ujaran panted. "I had to go up to 31. He struggled to force the doors open. He could open it with Jinx, but didn't trust it to not send the elevator plummeting back down to the garage. He stepped into the main corridor. "I'm heading to the stairs now. I'm going silent. Keep an eye out for any more changes to the list. I don't feel like being shot." "Your override code was cancelled," Lilac said. "Do you want a new one?" "Send me one as a precaution," Ujaran said. "I doubt I'll be needing it at this rate." "Will do. Good luck." Lilac sounded worried. Ujaran opened the door and started down the stairwell. "Where is my strawberry?" Adiaxie's thoughts were so oppressively powerful it sent him stumbling down the stairs, landing on his knees on the landing. "We don't know yet," Ujaran thought pleadingly. "Everyone's looking. Bruno had a lead. Bruno's really helping." Adiaxie mused as the extreme pressure around him eased. "He said you're his cock ring." Ujaran thought back. There was no reply. "By the powers," Ujaran whispered as he opened the door to the 30th floor. Directly across from the stairwell, the scorched, skeletal remains of 3 armed people of indeterminate species and gender were fused into the wall. Their skin was gone, their bones visible, their weapons warped. What was left of them glistened in the flickering overhead lights. The stench was overwhelming, and small droplets from the cooling plasteel wall had flowed onto their corpses. They were entombed within the wall. He began vomiting uncontrollably onto the shattered pulpy remains of more corpses, with remains that extended a dozen feet or more across the floor. "Ujaran, what are you seeing?" Lilac asked urgently. Melted, frozen, electrocuted, shattered, or impaled. There were at least a dozen bodies in the ruins of the main corridor. The walls were shredded and warped, the power conduits sparked, and cables hung from the ceiling, some of them coiled around the private security forces, suspending them above the floor. He could feel her rage suffocating him as he made his way further into the building. The carpet made squelching noises under his feet as he walked through the blood and water. Ujaran, Lilac snapped. What happened? Is Lady Darkseid hurt? He turned his tablet toward the carnage and growled. Have you seen enough? I don't want to see any more. Lilac sounded terrified. Who else is there? That couldn't all be from her. Could it? This was before she found out they took Strawberry. He shivered. She was still calm when she did this. When they told me she's dangerous. Lilac whistled softly. Has there been any word on Strawberry? Not yet, Lilac said. I doubt it would be this bad if private security hadn't opened fire, Ujaran sighed. When you find Nova, do me a favor and show her what happens when you open fire on a Cletherian queen. Adiarkse walked through a doorway at the end of the hallway carrying a blackened skull dangling at the end of a spine. Her kimono was ripped and blooded. She was holding a sword loosely in her other hand. Are you done yet? Ujaran asked. Do you know how to use the Query Dead Mystrionic ability? It never works for me, Adiarkse grumbled as she hoisted up the head in front of her. I just don't know what I'm doing wrong. It may not be my area of expertise, but I think they need lungs. Makes it hard to answer without them, even if they're dead. Well then you're no help, she said to the skull, then tossed it over her shoulder. I don't suppose you saw any more Monguni around here. Ujaran looked around on the floor. I think we are fresh out. Well, then can you tell me where Lilac is? Lilac didn't add you to the list, Ujaran said. Why does everyone blame me first? Lilac yelled over his headset. Really? Adiarkse asked. Do you know who did? A Leica called Nova, Ujaran answered. I'm going to kill that stupid cow, Adiarkse growled. After all this, Ujaran exclaimed while motioning around the room, you're not satisfied yet? There's a warrant out for her arrest. Leave it to the courts, so everyone will know what she and Dr. Zaius were involved in. Adiarkse rolled her eyes and walked back into the room. We don't have sufficient evidence to arrest him, Lilac said over his earpiece. She walked back out of the room holding the skull-capped spine and turned it to face her. How do you plead, Doctor? Adiarkse said, in a high-pitched voice, lowered her voice, and said, guilty. The skull fell to the floor as the spine broke. Kali shrugged as she dropped the spine. I guess that's settled. Where's my Strawberry? Did she just say she killed the doctor? Lilac said in his earpiece. Lilac wants to know why you killed the doctor, Ujaran smirked. During that event at Nim, some of his Monguni friends were telling me how genetically superior they are, so I just wanted to give them a display of my obvious inferiority, Adiarkse chuckled while walking to the elevator. That door won't open. It's been fused, Ujaran remarked as she pushed the button. It'll open for me, Kali scoffed. Who do you think sealed it? The metal liquefied and separated down the middle as the elevator arrived. Why are you limping? Adiarkse asked as they walked onto the elevator. You brought me to my knees from the third stair while yelling in my head, Ujaran mockingly asked. Why are you covered in blood? I might have been shot a little, but most of it's not mine. Ujaran smirked while shaking his head and pushed the button for the lobby. The door closed. He took out his tablet, hung up on Lilac, and switched it back to normal operation. Your hip is still bleeding, he said as the elevator continued its descent. It keeps reopening, she complained. The skin pulled itself together as she ran her finger along the edge of the wound. I prefer healing with Kobe Tam's regeneration, Adiarkse said irritably, but I needed to stay shut for long enough for it to take. Everything has its limitations. I wish I could use my psionic abilities to find Strawberry, but with her brain I can't. I'd have to get lucky and find someone standing near her. We'll find her, Ujaran reassured her. The elevator doors opened. Bruno. The sound of traffic faded as he continued down the dockside quay. The planet he came from didn't have what most would call technology. No funny light, nothing that banged, clanged, of word, no streets for vehicles to zoom down, skies clear of planes and ships. It was calmer, more predictable, but most importantly, it was quiet. His people knew who they were. They knew the smell of the wheat, the sound of their hearts, the feel of the wind, and the taste of the rain. Most of the people he met here thought he was somehow less, but they would have no idea who they were talking to if they met themselves walking down the road. They spent their days rushing around, staring at flashing lights, listening to faceless people talk in their ears, being told where they should go and what they should want or be. As advanced as the people may be, in Bruno's opinion, all their splendid devices existed just so they could run and hide from themselves. With mighty ships traversing the stars, you'd think they'd remember how small and unimportant we all are, but instead you ended up with important people everywhere you look. They were the biggest, best, most powerful. Whatever the voices in their ears and images on the screens told them they were. That's what started all this. Poor Sato. She was a nice girl and worked hard. Bruno worked security. When he wasn't running his event, he watched over all the kitties rushing around. Most of them kept stopping to talk to the screen in their pockets, but not Sato. She smiled when no one was looking. She must know who she is and enjoy the jokes she tells herself when she crosses her own path. Bruno was sure she'd be fine. She was tricky, but the good kind. Like the furrow mouse that tricked the duco bird into knocking ginkgo berry vines onto the ground so all could share in them. Sato came to Nim on her day off to play in events. She made a new friend for herself, and made friends for others too. It was like with the berries. Everyone becomes friends after they chase away the grumpy bird. This time the bird wasn't a bird, but they still flew when they made Tails angry. It was good for Bruno. Now he had a new Pharisine friend, and a girlfriend who has a penis, all because Sato convinced Tails to pick him as her event special substitution kitty. He was surprised Tails made it fit, but the 5 minutes of cuddle time was the best. As he finally neared the warehouse listed in the kitty's file, he circled the building while watching the toenail floating in the bowl turn, pointing at Sato. He wanted to know which entrance was closest to her. The closer she was, the faster it turned. It should be easy to get inside. People on this world are easily confused. Just tell them something true, and they'll get lost trying to understand you. He found the closest exterior wall. While moving the bowl around, he could tell she wasn't on the bottom floor, but not too high. Probably a warehouse office. So, once he found the closest door, he'd have to find a staircase nearby. He walked up a concrete staircase a few dozen yards from a loading dock and stood in front of a metal door. It was a bit too short for him, but wide enough. While holding the bowl close to his stomach, he knocked loudly on the door with the bulbous end of his walking stick. He smiled at the sound echoing through the open door to the dock. A few moments later, just as he was deciding if he should knock again, a Lupian with cream-colored fur opened the door. The little wolfish man looked up at him, nervously. "Can I help you?" Bruno stepped back quickly. The sound of his hoofs striking the stairwell echoed loudly. "Oh, scary wolf," Bruno said in a deep resonating voice. "You startled me. You look so large and powerful. I don't want any trouble. I'm just here looking for a coworker who's going to be late for their shift. Can you help me?" "What makes you think they're here?" the Lupian said while trying to stand taller and puffing out his chest. "The fingernail in my bowl says they are. Oh, and I have a name and address for their brother. Hold this, please." Bruno thrust his staff into the Lupian's chest, waited for him to grab it, then pulled out his sketch tablet, and showed him the employee record with the circled information that had helped lead him here. "So, are you looking for the employee or their brother?" they asked while holding his staff in one hand and tablet in the other. "I follow the nail," Bruno shrugged, "but maybe brother can help me find the employee." "Yeah, sure, come on in," the Lupien said, then stepped inside. The cream-colored wolf-like man gulped heavily as he realized just how much larger Bruno was once he stood at his full height and reached to reclaim his possessions. Bruno was walking heavier than he had to, just to hear the echo of his hooves. "Thank you, wolf person," Bruno said in a cheery booming voice. "Where do I find him, or do I keep following my nail?" "He should be in that office right over there," the Lupien said while pointing. "Thank you," Bruno said, lowering his head slightly. "Do you have many problems here? I'm surprised that they pay for guards who are so large and imposing." The Lupien straightened up and smiled broadly. Bruno patted him on the back, then headed toward the office, clamping all the way. He was certainly drawing attention, just as he wanted. If there were only 1 or 2 people involved in capturing Sato, the rest of the employees would want to help her so they wouldn't risk their jobs. If it went deeper than that, the Pharisee knew where he went. He would just have to keep Sato safe until Tails and Ujaran arrive. He moved his bowl from side to side as he neared the metal-grated stairs leading up to the office. Sato was definitely in there. He pinched the toenail against the side of the small earthen bowl and poured the water onto the dusty stone floor, slid his staff through his sash, and slipped both the nail and bowl into his medicine bag. Bruno didn't like violence. He was good at it, but he considered its use a personal failure. He enjoyed playing the part of the big scary ox from time to time, but that wasn't him. Tricking the Lupien holding Sato would be preferable. The stairs rocked and rang out. His hooves pounded against them as he approached the door. Blinds had been pulled down so no one could see inside. He knocked on the door, then again louder when there was no sign of a response. He checked the knob. It was locked. He spent a few minutes rummaging through his bag. A thin reed, some clay, string. He really needed to restock. He didn't have everything he needed. It wasn't a deadbolt, just a normal mechanical latch. He turned his back to the door and leaned against it. The Lupien who had been by the outside door had left to resume his rounds, and Bruno couldn't see anyone else watching. He raised his left leg and braced his hoof against the door, brought his leg forward and then back solidly. The door creaked and quaked. He turned around, turned the handle, and shoved. The inside of the wooden frame splintered, and the door swung open. His ears twitched as he listened for any noises from the back room. It was quiet. He tested the door to the other room. It wasn't locked. He held his staff tightly as he swung the door open. He was almost disappointed. Sato was tied to a chair in the corner of the room, gagged with industrial tape. There wasn't anyone else in the room. "Hello, Sato," Bruno said. "I was sent to save you. I will try to be quick." He snorted as he walked to the desk and started rummaging through the drawers, looking for scissors. Their desk is sloppy. There's a box cutter, but they're dangerous. Do you know if that's nylon rope? Sato's voice was muffled by the tape as she complained loudly. "Nylon cuts easier with a hot knife," Bruno said. "It's faster to cut than untie." Sato yelled something incomprehensible. "I found them," Bruno said while brandishing a pair of scissors. Sato grumbled into the tape. Bruno walked around the chair twice, making 3 cuts on his second pass, grabbed onto a knot behind her back, and made a 4th cut while kicking the chair out from under her. She sat on the floor surrounded by a pile of rope, looked around in confusion as the rope all fell to the ground and he helped her stand. "Untape your own mouth," he said. "I don't want to hurt you." She whimpered as she pulled off the tape, and winced as she tried to walk. Bruno leaned forward, interlocked his fingers, held his arms like a sling and said, "Sit down. I will carry you. Don't worry, I will get you to work on time." "Are you fucking kidding me?" Sato gasped. "No, you're not heavy," he insisted. "You will be easy to carry." People grab me at my own front door, because I'm expecting the takeout delivery person. They throw me into the back of a car, hold me at knife point, drag me out here, tie me up for hours, and you expect me to go to work? Sato scoffed. "It's the safest place for you," Bruno said. "Now sit down and I will carry you." She shook her head in disbelief as she sat in his outstretched arms, facing away from him. "Oh, thank you for the takeout," Bruno said merrily. "It tasted good. This would have been a great day to sleep through," Sato sighed. "Then they would have broken your door and tied you up undressed," Bruno scoffed as he walked her out of the office. "You have a point," she admitted. She giggled softly as he walked down the stairs with her. "What did you tell yourself?" he asked as they neared the exit. "The only one I want to tie me up is Carly, just with her tails." "Carly," he said under his breath to make sure he'd remember. He'd gone through an awful lot of trouble today, just to get the name of a woman he'd already had sex with. He asked Sato to open the door, and they left without further incident. "Carly. I made it myself while I was on Midguard." Carly smiled proudly. "Battle magic's great for sculpting weapons. I could make you something too, if you want. All I need is the raw materials." She rested one hand on the blade, her other on his hand, and sent a telepathic signal into the bark coating the handle, commanding it to release its hold of him. "That wood isn't found anywhere else in Corrales. Nasty vines, lots of thorns. They won't let you go unless you order them to with a telepathic command. The tricky part is you need to remain calm and focused. Master Sardakar's training methods were harsh, and throwing me into those brambles was one of the worst, but it showed me how to keep control when I need to. I'll probably sleep for a day or two as soon as my brain is convinced it's safe." Carly slid her sword back into its sheath. "So can you look into getting me a few pounds of Dareth Very steel and a length or two of frozen oak?" "I'll ask around," Ujaran sighed as he unlocked the side door to the armored personnel carrier and slid the door open. "This should do. There's no way we are all fitting in my car, not with Bruno along for the ride." "I could make a pretty little dagger for your wife too," Carly offered as she hopped inside. "They left me a few gal in my account. I can cover the costs." "Just a few gal," he snickered as he slid the door closed, then got into the front. "I only have 11 or 12 left," Carly said as he started the engine. "I just love the way you say that like it's nothing," Ujaran snorted, as he backed out of the parking spot. "I had over 2,000 before they froze and drained my account," Carly objected. "Lucky for me, Tyrell was able to shove most of my money into other accounts before they got to it. If he tries giving me any back, I'm sure they'll just take that too." She didn't mention that all that money had been given to her by Gamaro Inc. in the first place. The funds came with the title. Their attempt to buy her loyalty hadn't gone as planned. It may be a means to an end, but it wasn't a driving force behind her actions. Kulani may be queen and consent may be king in the Dominion, but money was clearly the lubricant that kept everything moving. He called Lilac on the dashboard console to provide her with the APC number as they headed toward the exit to the lot. "Please confirm, after you've secured the hostage, Carly will be returning peaceably to containment," Lilac said. "Not a fucking chance," Carly growled. "Can you guarantee me there aren't more of them?" They had a coalition of well-armed Kaimun and Monguni, as well as a few Lupians. "They used someone I consider a friend to try to get to me. I'm not returning to my pen until I'm confident she's safe, not a moment sooner." "We can assign guards at her residence," Lilac insisted. "Sure," Carly mocked. Why don't you put the bitch that added me to the valid targets list in charge of picking the guards? Ujaran, Lilac yelled. You told me you'd be able to get her contained. Did you think I meant by force? Ujaran snarled. Do I need to tell you how consent works? She has conditions. Once those conditions are met, she'll return. I've had objections to her treatment from day one. You've imprisoned and isolated her for no rational reason. Do you know who she called the first day I was allowed to take her out of that building? Her children. Do you know that? Do you even care? That wasn't an act of mercy, it was a clerical oversight. Carly blushed. She hadn't expected him to take a stand like this. Lilac could restrict his access, maybe even remove him from the dual citizenship program. Ujaran kept getting louder until he was nearly screaming. The next time out was because you wanted something from her. You told me to bring her somewhere for your benefit. She's not government property, and Adiarc is nobody's slave. He sat staring at Lilac's image on the screen, seething with rage. Lilac disconnected. Well, Carly said, that happened. Let's go before she decides to try and stop us from getting strawberry. He didn't respond. She leaned forward, reached through the slat between the front and back of the APC, and rested her hand on his shoulder. She could feel his heart racing. He was trembling with rage. She could use her empathic abilities to calm him, but had the impression he needed this. Carly sat back and waited. Ujaran, Carly said softly, I can feel Bruno's mind. She's with him. They're safe. His shoulders slumped forward as his breathing became less erratic. She could see tears trickling down his face in the rearview mirror. Sorry, he said in a shuddering breath. I've had an emotional day. Carly couldn't contain herself. She burst out laughing. He sniffed and wiped his eyes. I know. Let's go get our strawberry girl.